This video explains why governments ignore the exploding male loneliness epidemic. Male loneliness rates are rising faster than mental health funding worldwide. Young men report fewer close friendships than any previous generation. Many governments still classify loneliness as a secondary social issue. That classification changes how budgets are distributed every year. Men are far less likely to seek therapy voluntarily. Most public campaigns still target women and children first. Male suicide rates remain significantly higher across developed nations. Isolation strongly increases addiction, depression, and early mortality risks. Governments spend billions treating symptoms instead of preventing loneliness itself. Public health systems rarely track male friendship decline accurately. Most surveys focus heavily on employment and marriage statistics instead. That leaves emotional isolation practically invisible inside policy meetings. Male loneliness often develops slowly over many disconnected years. Teen boys now spend significantly less time socializing physically. Online communication replaced many real-world friendships after smartphone expansion. Social media creates interaction without building meaningful emotional support. Men increasingly report feeling emotionally disconnected despite constant online activity. Many young men describe friendships as shallow and temporary today. Economic instability also discourages social participation among struggling men. Rising housing costs force many adults into isolated living situations. Single-person households continue increasing across Europe and North America. Men living alone report significantly higher depression and substance abuse. Workplaces once provided stable male friendships through long-term employment structures. Those structures collapsed after decades of unstable gig employment. Gig economy workers rarely build lasting social relationships with coworkers. Remote work accelerated isolation trends for millions of young professionals. Many men now spend entire weeks without meaningful face-to-face interaction. Loneliness affects physical health, similarly to chronic smoking habits. Researchers consistently connect isolation with cardiovascular disease and dementia risk. Men are less likely to maintain support networks after breakups. Divorce dramatically increases social isolation risks for middle-aged men. Widowed men experience higher mortality rates than widowed women statistically. Many older men lose friendships after retirement, removes daily routines. Community organizations targeting men remain heavily underfunded internationally. Most governments still expect families to solve male isolation privately. That assumption ignores rising rates of unmarried and childless men. Birth rates decline partly because isolated men avoid long-term relationships. Loneliness creates economic consequences far beyond individual emotional suffering. Social isolation reduces productivity and increases healthcare spending nationally. Employers lose billions annually from loneliness-related burnout and absenteeism. Mental health systems already struggle with severe staffing shortages everywhere. Male patients often wait months before receiving affordable counseling appointments. Rural communities face even fewer mental health resources for men. Transportation barriers prevent isolated men from accessing support groups regularly. Many public clinics avoid male-specific outreach because budgets remain limited. Universities increasingly report loneliness among male students entering adulthood. Young men participate less frequently in clubs and organizations today. Modern life rewards independence while quietly punishing vulnerability. Boys are still socialized to avoid emotional openness with peers. Many men interpret vulnerability as weakness instead of healthy communication. That mindset reduces early intervention before emotional problems become dangerous. Governments fund anti-smoking campaigns more aggressively than anti-loneliness programs currently. Public health agencies rarely advertise male support hotlines consistently nationwide. Some countries recently appointed ministers specifically focused on loneliness policy. Those initiatives remain tiny compared with broader healthcare spending categories. The United Kingdom created loneliness strategies without major long-term investment. Japan recognizes social isolation as a growing national emergency already. South Korea reports severe loneliness among younger unemployed male populations. Scandinavian countries invest more heavily in community mental health programs. Even those programs rarely target lonely men specifically, though. Most initiatives focus broadly on general wellness instead of male isolation. Policy experts often hesitate discussing male loneliness without political backlash fears. Some activists worry male-focused programs reduce resources for women unfairly. That political tension slows investment, despite worsening male mental health outcomes. The conversation becomes ideological instead of evidence-driven public health planning. Research consistently shows social support improves mental health across genders equally. Male loneliness should not compete against women's mental health support systems. Both problems can worsen simultaneously under economic and social pressure. The pandemic accelerated loneliness dramatically for isolated young adult men. Lockdowns disrupted gyms, clubs, workplaces, and casual social routines everywhere. That damage still affects millions years after lockdowns ended. Gaming communities became emotional substitutes for many isolated young men. Those communities provide connection but rarely replace physical friendships completely. Parasocial relationships also increase significantly during periods of extreme isolation. Many lonely men consume endless content instead of socializing offline. Algorithms reward addictive engagement rather than healthy community participation patterns. Loneliness now intersects heavily with digital dependency and attention economics. Some men spend entire weekends without speaking to another person directly. That level of isolation historically affected only elderly populations commonly. Now, it increasingly affects men in their 20s and 30s. Many isolated men eventually disengage from politics and civic participation entirely. Distrust in institutions rises sharply. Isolation slowly turns citizens into detached spectators instead of participants. Some extremist communities specifically target lonely and emotionally vulnerable young men. Recruiters often exploit isolation by promising belonging and identity online. That creates serious long-term security concerns beyond mental health outcomes alone. Loneliness also correlates strongly with declining trust in democratic systems. Governments underestimate how isolation reshapes national stability over decades gradually. Historically strong communities protected individuals from emotional collapse during hardship periods. Modern urban life weakens many neighborhood relationships and local support systems. People know hundreds online but trust very few personally today. Men particularly struggle initiating emotional conversations without structured social environments available. Many men replaced friendships with screens without realizing the consequences. Economic stress leaves little energy for maintaining strong social relationships consistently. Long working hours reduce opportunities for friendships and romantic relationships alike. Men frequently prioritize career survival over emotional well-being during economic uncertainty. That trade-off creates emotional exhaustion long before visible mental breakdowns appear. Healthcare systems usually intervene only after severe crises become unavoidable emergencies. Preventative social programs remain politically unpopular because results appear slowly publicly. Infrastructure projects receive funding easier than emotional well-being initiatives politically. Roads and bridges show visible results during election campaigns immediately. Reducing loneliness produces benefits that appear gradually over many years instead. Reactive policy always costs more than early prevention eventually. Every isolated person represents future healthcare and economic burdens eventually accumulating. Social isolation increases emergency healthcare visits and psychiatric hospitalization rates significantly. Lonely individuals often experience weaker immune systems and chronic inflammation medically. Governments already pay enormous costs created indirectly by untreated loneliness nationwide. The problem is prevention budgets remain fragmented across multiple departments bureaucratically. Health ministries, schools, and labor agencies rarely coordinate effectively together. Education systems also contribute unintentionally to declining male social development patterns. Boys increasingly fall behind academically across many developed education systems today. School disengagement later increases unemployment, and long-term social isolation risks significantly. Some men emotionally withdraw long before adulthood ever officially begins. College attendance gaps between young men and women continue widening annually. Lower education levels correlate strongly with social isolation and unemployment statistically. Communities with weak social trust experience greater loneliness and declining civic participation. Religious participation also declined sharply among younger generations in recent decades. Churches historically provided friendship networks and emotional support for many men. Fewer community anchors now exist for disconnected young adults seeking belonging. Volunteer organizations also struggle recruiting younger male participants consistently nationwide. Many men describe modern life as emotionally transactional and highly individualistic today. Friendships increasingly depend on convenience instead of loyalty and shared responsibility. Stable friendships need time, consistency, and physical presence to survive. Technology accelerated communication while reducing many forms of deeper social intimacy. Mental health professionals increasingly warn about epidemic-level loneliness among younger men globally. Some researchers compare loneliness trends to obesity and smoking epidemics historically. Yet governments still allocate relatively tiny prevention budgets toward community rebuilding efforts. Local sports programs often lose funding despite measurable mental health benefits. Public libraries and recreation centers increasingly close under municipal budget pressure. Those spaces once helped isolated people build casual friendships naturally nearby. Modern cities contain millions of people, but little social cohesion practically. Governments discuss productivity constantly, while ignoring emotional infrastructure almost completely. Right now, millions of men feel completely disconnected from that vision. Many isolated men stop believing society genuinely cares about their well-being anymore. That emotional detachment weakens communities long before economic collapse becomes visible publicly. Governments cannot solve loneliness entirely through spending alone realistically. But strategic investment could reduce suffering and strengthen communities substantially over time. Affordable counseling access would help isolated men seek support earlier consistently. Community recreation spaces could encourage healthier real-world social interaction again. Schools could teach emotional communication skills more effectively to young boys. Employers could support healthier work-life balance without punishing vulnerability professionally. Ignoring this crisis now guarantees much larger problems later. Male loneliness already affects healthcare systems, economies, education, and national stability simultaneously. The epidemic grows quietly because isolation rarely creates immediate visible emergencies publicly. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.